Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So we will start on page 1 of the breath. We begin by acknowledging the Wajapinonga people, traditional custodians on the lands on which we meet today, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples everywhere. Sangye chudun sakhi chonam lam janchu badu dabni kapsun chi dagi chenyen gi pe sonam ki drola panchu sangye chu pasho sangye chudun sakhi chonam lam janchu badu dabni kapsun chi dagi chenyen gi pe sonam ki drola panchu sangye chu pasho sangye Chudon soye chonam ham, chanchu badu dabni kyatsu chi, dagi chenyen gipe sonam ki, drola panche sange dropa shu. Setting a most profound Mahayana motivation for engaging in listening, reflecting, debating, thinking about these profound teachings of particularly on the Tantra path. So, of course, this is it's an introduction to that, to just sort of look at the main elements of Tantra and different levels of Tantra, and how we might take that as our resultant path, as we said last week, the resultant path, becoming a Buddha and bringing that into the path right now. So this is most precious, most rare, most profound teaching. Okay, so I already have a question on notice. So if there's any questions arising, well, we can start off with those. So the first one, there was a request to explain the prostration mudra. So mudra means hand gesture. I think all these are fancy words, but that's what it means. So how we put our hands when we prostrate. So we put our hands not flat, but you see I've got my thumbs inside the fingers there. So there are different ways that we think about that. One is that we think this is our Buddha nature, right? Hasn't yet become fully a Buddha, but it's our Buddha nature, the potential for which we have. It's innate to every living being, even the cockroaches and the ants and so. So our Buddha nature. Sometimes I've heard it said like lotus bud in the lotus, but actually in like Lama Zopa Rinpoche's one commentary is that we're thinking of this as like a precious jewel. And as we come in, even we come into the Gompa, that when we make prostrations, and even we can prostrate to each and every one of all the Buddhas that we can see, because there's Buddhas on every atom of space. So each and every one. So any of those ways is fine. It's something precious, very precious, right? And of course, when we talk about jewels, then we talk about that in Tantra, all the tantric Buddhas wear jewelry. And what's that to symbolize is the different aspects of their realization. So all those jewels we visualize radiating light in all directions. So that's the prostration mudra. And then we place it to the crown of our head. And we think about that as creating the cause to have the ujnisha, the crown protrusion of the Buddha. You know, I went to this exhibition many years ago at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, quite a long time ago now. It was called Goddesses, I think, pretty sure. And it was Hindu and Buddhist female deities and Buddhas and so forth. And there was one of the Hindu ones, and you see the iconography, there's a lot of similarity, but the Ujnisha was sort of stacked up, like really, really up, so we can visualize like that. The realizations are, what we call it, immeasurable. So that's, and then we place it to our forehead, and that's to purify our ordinary body. We think that, and create the causes for the pure body of a Buddha. We place it to our heart chakra, center of our chest, and we think of purifying our ordinary speech and creating the causes to have the pure speech of a Buddha. Oh, throat, sorry. Throat, that's one's throat. Heart chakra, mind, purifying our ordinary everyday blah blah mind and creating the causes to have the sort of pure mind of a Buddha that sees reality exactly as it is, that knows all that is to be known and so forth. So you could see how this would apply in Tantra, that you, even without taking a tantric empowerment, without even knowing, you're already establishing those thoughts in your mind of becoming a Buddha, using visualization for that. So we're going to talk more about that. So thank you for the question. It was very timely. And then when we prostrate, of course, we're presenting ourselves as humbly and with deep respect and paying homage to the Buddha for teaching, and our precious gurus, or the lineage lamas, or the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We can go for it. The whole merit field here that we have of Lama Tsongkhapa. Lama Tsongkhapa in the middle, inseparable from our own guru, inseparable from Shakyamuni Buddha. So we like a bit of visualization, and that's what Tantra is about. Okay. Were there any other questions coming up meantime? Well, when they come, just speak up. Okie doke. So last week we were introducing this topic of Tantra and how sutras, the causal path, Tantra's the resultant path of bringing that resultant Buddhahood into the path, practicing that, just like we talked about. And so we were looking at this idea of that being, creating ourselves, for ourselves, images of purity, like our own pure nature, Buddha nature, Tathagata, Gaba, our own pure nature, our Buddha nature. And because we have Buddha nature, we can become a Buddha. We just have to wake it up, cultivate it. So we start to mention last week how it represented in tankas and so forth, all the symbolism that comes along with each and every one. I was in the early days when I was at Vajrayana Institute, somebody requested to have a commentary on all the images or the representations in the Gompa. And so I spoke to Geshe Sampton, whether so-and-so could do that, a monk who was there at the time. And he said, people specialize in one of those. Like, if you're going to go elaborate, there's certain things that are common once you get to know what implements and things the deities have, but we don't need to go into that detail right now. So these representations of enlightened beings come not from an artist, they come from the direct realizations of beings, so that they've had that direct perceptual engagement with that deity. For example, Lama Tsongkhapa himself, he had after quite a lot of purification practice, ended up having direct, so first of all, he didn't have the sort of direct perception of Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom. I'm pointing there because we have a Tantra here for Manjushri. So he would go through his teacher, and then he thought, I want that direct communication with Manjushri. And so when he attained that, this would have been what he saw. So last week we talked about the 4 bodies of a Buddha. Once you have the direct perceptual realization of emptiness, then you see them in this aspect directly, which we call enjoyment body, Sambhogakaya. You see them in that form. It's a very subtle light body. It's all made of light. It's not a clunky body, which is, it's not like a form that we as humans can recognize. So it's much more subtle. It's light. Okay. So, and then as I mentioned last week, they're generally, we cover over certain ones. And I mentioned that Vajrasattva in particular, because this is one of the ones for discovering Buddhism, that as we're coming to the end of this round, the following module is a practice one of which is 100,000 Vajrasattva, accumulation of 100,000 Vajrasattva mantras, which if you're doing the practice full-time takes 3 months. There's 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 Vajrasattva. There's 3 nyongnyes. There's lam-rim retreat. What else? Is that it? I think that's it. There's no actual memorization to pass.
I thought there was when I did it, and it's changed.
No.
The last song, Kappa, 14 verse.
Oh, I just added in. I added that in.
Okay.
Foundation of all good qualities. That's all right. It wasn't a requirement, but thank you for following the instruction. And the reason for that is then you've got it in your mind stream. Like if you know the whole lam-rim off by heart, by those 14 verses, then you've always got it in your mind. So that's what you're taking with you. Okay, so some are shown in sexual embrace, some are depicted in wrathful forms with the fire. I mentioned that last week. For those whose minds aren't pacified, they say, by peaceful means, we need to be woken up by a bit of more powerful methods. And so a unique feature of Tantra is our willingness to engage with the powerful energies, our powerful energies of our human psyche, which is more subtle than our, but it's also, it's using a subtle body of channels and winds and so forth. So that's unique to Tantra. So unpacking that a little bit, we have this quote from Lama Yeshe from the Intro to Tantra. Tantra provides powerful methods to getting in touch with our essential wholeness. So that's what Lama Yeshe calls Buddha nature, our true essence, if we like. And tantric art is filled with potent symbols of the unity and completeness characteristics of our fully realized potential. The image of male and female deities in sexual embrace, taken by some early Western interpreters of Tibetan Buddhism as a sign of its degeneration. And in fact, people have used that wrongly, you know. I don't know if they still do that, but I remember years ago there was like, come along to this tantric sex weekend and all of this, and that's a degeneration. That's not an understanding. You can see why the need to have it protected and passed on in secret, because then people's ordinary minds make it what it isn't. It's not that. It's all symbolic. So it's a symbolic portrayal of our own inner unification of our male and female energies. So that's at one level, bringing our own, those energies. And then on a deeper level, it's for at highest yoga tantra, which is the subtlest practice of tantra, is generating the most blissful, most subtle and blissful state of mind. And this blissful state of mind that is so subtle, it's suited to penetrate ultimate reality. In other words, to see things directly as they are, not as our mind elaborates on top, and to free us from all our deluded states of mind, all our afflictions and suffering. So once we're free of all of that, that's a cause for liberation, the middle scope, you know, of freedom from our afflicted states of mind. And in particular, that root ignorance of grasping at existence, of having a self, of grasping at things to be permanent and independent and self-sufficient. In other words, all the ways we get reality wrong, because nothing is any of that. So those of you who are here for the emptiness module, we looked at that more thoroughly. So the intent is to get to this very subtle level of mind, to be able to use the power of that wisdom and combining that with compassion in a way that, of course, we do that on the sutra path, but in the tantra path, that sexual union represents those two coming together in the one mind, wisdom and compassion. So when we develop bodhicitta, the power of our wisdom empowers those practices. When we're developing wisdom, our bodhicitta is in power of that, it's empowering that. Right. So that's one way of looking at that. For those who are ripe, or whose minds are ripe, merely seeing such an image can help restore the connection between the male and female aspects of their being. I mean, it may be that you've practiced Tantra in past lives, and even though you can't remember seeing that image, it sort of reconnects with all that past practice and that connection between our own inner male and female aspects. And one thing that I find, well, many things quite interesting, but the Buddha Chenrezig, right, is represented in the Tibetan tradition as a male form. Chenrezig is male, has either 1,000 arms or 8 arms or 4 arms or 2 arms. The Buddha of compassion. And in the Chinese tradition, as you may well be aware, Kuan Yin is female form. So female, male, but the combination of those energies coming together in Tantra is what we say the combination of the illusory body. In other words, the very subtle Buddha body, illusory, like, you know, seeing Manjushri directly, seeing Chenrezig directly, and the clear light mind, which is that pure, very subtle mind. So those two coming together is that combination of the male and female aspects as well. That's what it represents. Seeing such an image can restore that However, for this connection to be re-established, it is necessary to cut through the influence of the over-intellectualizing conceptual mind, basically our conceptual mind. This type of conceptualization is largely responsible for the feelings of being alienated from our inner reality. So when we talk about emptiness, seeing things directly as they are, we talk about that, of course, also in relation to external objects, people, things, objects and so forth, perceiving them directly as they are, not as we elaborate on top. But also think about the chit-chat we have with ourselves and how we're disconnected from our own purity. Isn't it so much that we focus a lot on our inadequacies, what I'm not good at, etc., like all the time? That's our very, very ordinary mind. And so the practice of Tantra is to cultivate this extraordinary mind because it has extraordinary power. Just think, if we think positive, right, our minds are more empowered, right? So then we're able to do more. So we disempower ourselves. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'll never get this. Oh, not in this lifetime. Blah, 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 blah. Putting ourselves down. No, we put ourselves up. But we have to be careful about not in an arrogant, proud way, because that's a deluded state of mind. Anyway, so the visualization, I'll just finish this little bit. The symbols, the images used are much more effective than using words, because it's that direct impact without the intervention of words. So even people are not interested in Buddhism and so forth, they're attracted to an image of the Buddha. They're not going to study what a Buddha is or They're not going to go there. But the power of that, we talk about the power of the object from its own side, right? But of course, we have to engage with that. So you can see a lot of people in the world. I mean, people have them on their walls, in their gardens, they have them everywhere. Buddha images are popular, right? And most people who have a Buddha image are not necessarily interested in becoming Buddhist, but it represents what? Something peaceful, something good energy. The associations are like that. So this is also associating that with our own innate qualities of love, compassion, kindness, generosity, patience, all of the above. Question 1, 2.
First one, just get in my head. So when you talk about the 3 months of 300,000
prostrations, 100,000 prostrations. Yes, Vajrasattva.
Is that like a preliminary practice?
Yes. Okay, so that's a very good question. I mean, all questions are very good questions, but thank you for asking. So we talk about these preliminary practices, or nyondro, 100,000 of this, 100,000 of this, and that, and the other thing. And there's a group of us, Team Nyondro, who are currently doing the accumulation of the 100,000 refuge prayer, the one that we recited at the beginning. So 100,000 of that. We're not doing it in a full retreat setting, although we did have a retreat at the beginning of the month. But we're doing sessions and then doing it home and so forth. So some of these you can do without having to do in a retreat setting. So I'll talk about both. So one, for discovering Buddhism, as I mentioned, Vajrasattva. So that's a tantric representation of here is Vajrasattva. I just got a beautiful Vajrasattva statue. I don't know. Our dear friend Tom, it's his 49th day today. And have we got the statue? Oh, it's up here. Sorry. It's just in there. Anyway, we acquired a lot of his from Tom's estate Dharma materials. 14 malas, exquisite malas. actually. Many, many beautiful things. I don't know if people see. This is in a beautiful box. I don't know if you sort of see. But now we have a beautiful Vajrasattva. Creating the cause for that 3-month retreat, Susan.
Sorry.
Creating the cause for that 3-month retreat you were so keen about. So, coming back. So Vajrasattva, as I said, one of the preliminary practices that Lama Zopa Rinpoche had instructed for completing discovering Buddhism, who those who wish to complete, and there's no obligation to complete, but there's benefits, so it's not for no reason, is 100,000 of Vajrasattva mantra, right? It's in the practice, in the context of doing a short practice, not just walking around the street doing Vajrasattva, where you do the visualization and so forth. And this is the one that we've been doing here once a month in general. I can't remember if we scheduled it in the calendar for the next month. I can't remember. However, once you start accumulating that practice, like Tim Nyondro doing the refuge breath, if you miss one day, you start again. And because, just to say, yesterday we were having the final one for January of our practice together. And it was like, oh, we're not going to stop because we've accumulated a significant number, want to keep going. And even for as long as you do that, say like with the refuge mantra, that you're living in that refuge because you're doing that practice every day. Anyone can do that. You don't need a tantric empowerment because Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha is the Buddha, of the sutra. Buddha aspect of the sutra teachings. Buddha Vajradhara is the aspect of the Tantra teachings. I haven't even yet answered your first question. Yes, your own resultant Buddhahood, basically. Awakening all your own pure nature and really that's what you're focusing on. The natural purity, just like when we think about that when we're prostrating. There's many, many aspects, but it's working. Why Tantra is more powerful is that it's working with the very subtle energies in our body, which are not the, you could say not observable by surgeons or anything like that. They're not going to work and go, oh, there's the central channel, there's the other channels, this is all the channels in the body, 72,000 channels in the body. So this is why they say a human form is best for this practice. So talking about finishing off your question. So with something like Vajrasattva, it is, while it can be done as a 3-month retreat, and when I was over East and ran the Vajrasattva end of year purification retreat, people like to do a Vajrasattva end of year purification. We all have these rituals for end of year. Why not make it a really powerful one? Anyway, that group there was really like, well, let's do it in 2026. So that's next year, isn't it? Or maybe we said 2027. Can't remember. But anyway, thinking ahead to plan another one. There's only been 2 in Australia. One, Lama Yeshe in 1974. And then the second one that I ran at Chenrezig in 2019. So 2 so far in Australia. There's been at least one in New Zealand. But generally people go to India, to Shida, to do, and Dharamsala to do, because that's every, I think every 2 years they do. It is advertised, the next one coming up is advertised already. So that's one of the Nyondro preliminary practices to do for discovering Buddhism. And the other one is the 100,000 prostrations, so the prostrations to the 35 Buddhas, which also takes like 3 months if you're doing it full time. Only ever saw it once advertised as being offered for 3 months. Of course, one can do it at home for 3 months if you have the conditions. I know, may not have the conditions to do it at home. Should you have, I met one gentleman in the US who we were at these retreats with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and he was in my discussion group that I was leading, and he had spent his year, he was retired and he lived alone, and he spent a year doing the lam-rim retreat for a year. And then he was thinking, what will I do next? And he was thinking of going to see Lama Zopa Rinpoche, but then he decided he'll do another year of that. He'll do it again. Sadly, however, when he left the retreat, like directly, he went into town on the bus, got off that bus and was going to catch another bus. And he was killed crossing the road. But you just think in his mind, he was in the lam-rim. I mean, he'd just come from this month-long retreat and, you know, we're going to die something. Okay, so these nyondro, the ones that are for discovering Buddhism, you don't have to do in a retreat setting. You can do on a daily basis, you know, and accumulate. And then when we have things like nyungnes, for example, we do a lot of prostrations here, so you can accumulate a lot more. Vajrasattva practice, accumulate a lot more. And this is indeed, just to embarrass her, how Venerable completed, like doing as a regular practice.
Yeah. You just sort of, you know, we were talking about plotting. You're doing so much each day.
You do so much plotting, but then you've got to also do the numbers and figure out how many years that's going to take you. And, you know, maybe up the ante in your plotting, you know, maybe make it a...
Yeah, but every once in a while, say you've got a free day, you can go, oh, I'm going to spend a couple of hours. You know,
yeah.
You just keep going.
You keep going, basically. So for that, it's not required to do it, as we say, on the one seat. On the one seat is that when you're literally, you're doing it in the one spot for 3 months, however long it takes you. Right. So where you're right, there, Susan, there are preparatory practices. For example, there is a practice of doing like a 3-year deity retreat. So say your deity is Vajrasattva. So you spend the first year doing all those nyondros, accumulating the whole set. You go off to a retreat place or your retreat setting, and that's your first year to remove the obstacles to your deity practice retreat. And then, so that's in that way, it's preparatory. But most people in life doing those practices, should they even complete them, are not going to get, may not even get to that deity retreat. I mean, who's got 3 years? Yeah. I mean, reality of life, right? Often when people are doing it, they're a little bit elderly by then. So, yeah, so that's that. That's where it comes as preparatory practices. And just to mention, like I mentioned, that we have this Team Nyondro, the group that is doing the refuge Nyondro. In fact, when Geshe Zopa, who some of you have gone to his teachings, when he next comes here in July, he'll be actually introducing that practice. So he's committed to, if you like, roll out 5 preliminary practices, Nyondro, over the next 5 years in each center that he goes to. And so he'll be doing that in July. So those people are already accumulating, will be more familiar. And the idea that you then have that a year to complete that one, and then the next one comes along, and you've got a year to complete that one at home, or we put on sessions here, whatever. So anyway, that's a long answer to your very brief question.
It's July.
Yes, this July. So when he comes here, he'll be introducing the refuge Nyondro. So that's not one of the ones for completion of discovering Buddhism, just mentioning, anyone who's interested in that, but it is usually the first one that people do. It's sort of like the easiest one to do. What happened was Geshe Zopa presented that at Langri Tangpa last year. And there was a group of us who watched together, and then people were keen to get started straight away. And hey, look, who am I to knock back people who want to get started straight away? Yeah, so that's why that started. You know, if there's a group of people interested in a practice, I'm there to help. Hold on. What's your name?
Joanne.
Joanne.
Kind of don't really know how to do it.
Okay.
But we were talking about that's like
They're attracted to the Buddha and they, yeah.
But I wonder about, and this is a sort of problem like this, is whether you don't have enough understanding of something.
Yes. When you don't have enough understanding of something, it definitely creates distortions. And for example, even the people putting the Buddha images in the garden, often they're down low. And we say, no, you know, that's sort of like disrespectful of putting them down low where they're like where your feet are going to point towards. So that would be disrespectful. So if I went into someone's garden, it was down low, and I'd be suggesting, oh, how about we put a pedestal up so you can see it at eye level? I'm not going to criticize them for what they're doing, but maybe suggesting that it be elevated and so forth. I heard that somebody had one as a doorstop. As a doorstop. Oh, that's a bit low. And who am I to talk? Because at Vajrayana Institute one time we were hosting His Holiness representative in Australia, and he came in and was doing circumambulating the stupa, and he goes, Anila, that's me. What's that Buddha doing there? And so there's sort of like at the base of the stupa, there's a ledge, which is, you know, about this high. And there was a stone Buddha on top of that. So it wasn't at people's feet level, it was raised up a bit. Oh, no. He said, who's the most important, you know, figure in Buddhism? Shakyamuni Buddha. Well, what's he doing down there? Because I knew that I would understand and put it up. Yeah. So even that was very wrong. Okay. So, but if people don't understand, and this is where, in particular, with Tantra, it's been passed on, you know, from the Buddha, was passed on in secret, so that people don't distort it, like do their tantric sex weekends or whatever, or, you know, relate to it as a degeneration, relate to it in a very mundane, ordinary, worldly way, because it's not. So this is why people doing that need the teachings, you know. They need the introduction, which is what we're doing here. This is just the introduction. You can see it already as an introduction. There's quite a lot to get your head around. Yeah. Yvonne was next. And then you. Yeah. Yeah.
Seal the leakages. We're talking about sealing leakages as well, so that we're not our practice in general.
Well, sealing leakages, it's sort of like Geshe-Sopa has interesting language sometimes, and it's quite interesting because it's not his first language, and so to hear that. So basically, it's to more and more work on purifying our mind, yeah, to protect it against those ordinary mundane minds and afflicted states of mind and the ones that get it wrong, etc. And also to provide a very solid foundation then for your practice by engaging in the refuge non-dro is very foundational. You know, what's the first thing we do when we decide we want to be Buddhists? We take refuge, right? And so there's already a lovely just daily practice of that. We're having our gold books there, also in little booklets that are out in the bookshop, I think. a daily practice, meditating on Shakyamuni Buddha, and it's so rich, beautiful practice, and it does introduce mantra, it introduces visualization, and all these are foundational aspects. Also, if we think about it for Tantra, we can see how that would apply. However, it's also, as Geshe-la said, as long as you're engaging in that practice, you are living in refuge. And what do we mean by refuge? That we have the protection, the Guru, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And so, and along with our commitment to, sort of be a good Buddhist at the minimum. And then we're like, well, what does being a good Buddhist mean? And so then we get the teachings on that. So in that way, you could say sealing leakages, just like last week we were talking about mantra being protection for the mind. So it's awakening our own pure nature. Yeah. Yes. At the teachings?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We could say them right now if we had the book. Get the gold book. Oh, is it in our little? It's not in. It is in this one. Okay. You can see how often I find it in this book. So, 4 immeasurables. So, first of all, we're talking about 4 immeasurable minds, 4 immeasurable thoughts. They're actually qualities of mind. And you think of all the positive qualities of mind are by their very nature immeasurable, right? We might be limited in our capacity for them at the moment, but they are immeasurable. They're also called the 4 divine abodes. Now, I quite like that translation, like abiding in these 4 qualities of mind. Viharas. Vihara means divine abode. And if you think about that from a tantric perspective, which it's not necessarily, because, you'll see this in Theravadan Buddhism as well, that, but from a tantric perspective, when we talk about divine abode, I think I mentioned last week, the mandala, each Buddha has its own mandala or celestial mansion, divine abode, all means the same thing. And these 4 immeasurable thoughts, so just looking in the order it's presented here, so the first one's immeasurable love, the second one's immeasurable compassion, the third one's immeasurable joy, and the 4th one is immeasurable equanimity. Okay, so, and the other part of the immeasurable is that we're cultivating the mind that wishes this for each and every sentient being who are themselves immeasurable beings. In this world system, even we don't know how many gazillions of beings there are in this world system, if you think of all the insects in the sky, in the ground, and they keep finding more and more. They go down further into the earth and go, oh, we found this one. And then in the oceans, in the, I think, Sangata Sutra, the Buddha says there's nobody who's gotten to the depth of the great ocean, depths of, the depth of the great ocean. Marinet's fault, got it right this time. I always have to think about which one it is.
Just found something there the other day that they have.
Marinet's trench. Right. San Andreas fault, Marinet's trench. I confused the two. Marinet's trench. So that's supposedly as far down that you can go so far. No. Just doing something with the door. Oh, we can keep it open. It was just for the noise earlier. Yeah. So anyway, I did watch a documentary where the people were diving, and they have to do a very quick dive because it is so far down. Don't ask me how far, but a very long way. And found fish. Is that what you saw, Colin?
Yeah, some strange, very some strange creature they found there.
They found a strange creature there, a living being,
yeah.
a future Buddha. A Buddha to be. They found a Buddha to be. So more and more. So when we think immeasurable, as Lama Yeshe says, think big, vast. Right? So we'll pause at the end of each line and I'll just say there. So it says, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. So this is immeasurable love. In the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, the first teaching the Buddha gave, happiness is the third noble truth, a cessation of all the toxic emotions, disturbing states of mind, everything negative, afflictions. And it's said to be a state of bliss, right? Peace, bliss. So, and that's like enduring happiness. And the causes of happiness is the fourth noble truth, which is the Eightfold Noble Path, or as we say, the lam-rim, the graduated path to enlightenment. Like, how do I get there? That's all very nice, but how do I get there? So may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering, and the causes of suffering is immeasurable compassion for immeasurable beings, not bearing to see the suffering in the world. So just like Buddha Chenrezig, took on that commitment out of his infinite compassion, endless compassion, of wanting to rid the world, rid beings of suffering. And then looked around after some eons, said, oh, he distressed with the suffering continued, and 2 tears came down, because he said, if I ever despair, may I split into 1,000 pieces. And that's what happened. He split into 1,000 pieces. And his guru, Buddha Amitabha, who's on top of his head, the red one, Buddha of infinite light, Amitabha, he split into 1,000 pieces, put him back together, and that's why he's got 1,000 arms and all the different faces and all the eyes, 1,000 eyes. I just think he's got the arms and arms. Can I help? Can I help? Can I help? Anywhere?
And more capacity.
More capacity to help. And then out of these tears came Tara. So on one side came green Tara, and then her whole entourage, all these 21 Taras. Tara says, I'll help. So she's like swift action. Come on. I'll help you, Chenrezig. And then white Tara, who we don't have over here, but I think we've got one image somewhere in here. White Tara, Joka, is long life. So they both came and helped out. Okay. So that's immeasurable compassion for immeasurable beings. And of course, these days, we see His Holiness the Dalai Lama as the Buddha Chenrezig. And going back to Lama Yeshe's quote here about sometimes people just need that activation by seeing the image. Well, so this woman who years ago managed to get an interview with the Dalai Lama, and she wasn't even Buddhist, right? I'm not saying he only talks to everybody, dogs as well. There was one time he was driving along to an event, and he said, stop the car. And he got out to talk to this little boy and his dog, because it was like they were so in the present and so having a beautiful, loving exchange. It was just lucky boy, lucky dog. Stop the car. Yeah. As his sort of security people say, is that who makes the decision? Oh, the big man. If he says stop the car, you stop the car. It's a big man, because he is. He's quite tall. Okay, so where were we? Immeasurable compassion. Why did I say all that? Oh yes, this woman. She had this interview with the Dalai Lama, and my friend, sadly since passed away, he was like Nyungne. He was responsible for a lot of the Nyungnes at Vajrayana Institute and a lot of the Chenrezig practice, because he was just like, come on, we've got to do another Nyung. Anyway, so he saw her afterwards and said, how'd it go? And what she described seeing, Thousand Arm Chenrezig. So it awakened something in her mind. I mean, she had the karma to get an interview with the Dalai Lama, very hard. Because, you know, imagine how many millions and millions of people in the world are saying, oh, could I have a chat? Yeah. One of my friends had 2 hours with His Holiness. I said, what question did you ask? Give us a hint. Yeah. So may all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that knows no suffering, free of suffering altogether. So this is immeasurable joy. So we visualize that all beings attain enlightenment where you are totally, there's nothing negative in the mind stream. There's nothing that's going to cause any unhappiness, any actual suffering of the mind. Because you think, well, the Dalai Lama had a knee replacement, he had cancer, he's had, you know, the frailties of the human body, but not of the mind. Immeasurable joy. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of attachment and hatred for those held close and distant. So a Buddha has even regard for all beings, regardless of whether they help, hinder, or do neither. And so even regard, why? Because we all have Buddha nature. So we're all potential Buddhas. So they sort of tap into your purity, not into all your sort of naughtiness, and tap into your purity and speak to that purity. So that's why it can be very profound sometimes when we're in front of, like, I remember the first time I was in a teaching with the Dalai Lama. Admittedly, it was 10 days, but it wasn't just a minute. I was floating on air for 6 months. You know, that purity, that energy, and even I didn't get anywhere near close. Still, like, it's a very blissful feeling. Of course, why only 6 months? Because I was dealing with my mind, not the Dalai Lama's mind. But it's quite powerful. So this is the mind that recognizes that none of us want to suffer. All of us want to be happy. In that way, we're equal. We don't have to invite them all home. We don't have to really, we work on if we can like them, but, you know, we at least hold them evenly in our gaze, which is what a Buddha does. So it's immeasurable. And who benefits from all this practice? We do. When we talk immeasurable, this is what Lama Yeshe was saying, think big, of expanding the spaciousness. Well, our mind is naturally limitless, like limitless space. It's not equivalency, but just to put an analogy, that it knows no bounds because it's not physical. But for our thinking to think big is something we need to train, it would seem, because all the sort of negative stuff sort of cramps us, you know, narrows our vision. Okay, so that's the 4 immeasurables. Thank you. We will, if I don't do it next week, remind me. Okay. All right. Oh, no, sorry. More questions. Yes, go. Yes, that we have. Buddha nature, we have Buddha nature.
Can you see, I'm wondering about all these images.
Yes.
Is it okay? When you look at these, they're reflections. Or
yes, they are reflections. It's true. Our own.
What's already present
in us, yes, is correct. Yes.
Even though we're not aware of it, conscious of it.
Correct. They're reflections.
We see.
That's a reflection. It's like mirror image to awaken our own positive qualities. That's the purpose, the function. Right. One function of it is that of awakening that within us. And that's including the people who put the Buddha images in their garden and so forth. There's, it's tapping into something that maybe they can't articulate, but it's that it, there's a heart response, isn't it? It's a heart response.
It's kind of interesting to kind of think about.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's why we have so many images around. Like if you go into Zen Buddhism, you won't see all of this because, they don't do the tantric path. It's very much because, Tibet was, if you like, isolated from the rest of the world for so long. A lot of the teachings were preserved there. And so, yeah, these days, of course, things are changing in Tibet, as we know, just like everywhere else. But this is where we're grateful in a way that because of the Chinese coming into Tibet, the Dalai Lama came into India, we have access to the teachings. The teachings were there, but we never knew. How many of us speak Tibetan? Even I tried to learn from time to time, I'm not a very good student. So, yeah. So we're very fortunate in the world. Yeah. And then, of course, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, it's up to you Westerners, or up to, well, I don't know, who's East, who's West these days, up to us, because a lot of the Tibetan Lamas who have all this knowledge and so forth and deep practice have either passed away, Lama Zopa Rinpoche himself, suddenly. Yeah, so it's sort of like, well, it's up to you to gain realizations. It's just step up. Up to us. As the Dalai Lama said some years ago, this was 2018, I remember, because I was on pilgrimage. The Dalai Lama we weren't in Bodh Gaya with the Dalai Lama. We were in India, but not there. But the Dalai Lama announced that he wasn't going to be traveling anymore, but beyond 5 hours trip because of his knees. And he said, to my American friends, I've taught you everything there is to teach. It's up to you to practice. We can apply that to ourselves as well, that we have the accessibility. But what's the important thing? Why are we doing this? Not as an intellectual exercise, because we'll never get to the heart. Right? But given the only thing we're taking with us is our mind, so even having these imprints, and you don't even know what they are. So the story of the old man who came to wanted to request the Buddha, so he had the karma to be around at the time of the Buddha and be in the location. He wanted to request the Buddha. He wanted to ordain. He wanted to become a monk. And, so the Buddha's close disciples, so he had Raghana and Shariputra. And neither of them, one sent to the other, they couldn't see any good qualities in this guy, so they kept telling him to go away. But he persisted, and he managed to get to speak directly to the Buddha and request, and the Buddha ordained him. Because out of the clairvoyance of the Buddha, he could see that in his past lives, in one past life, he was a fly on a cow dung, on a cart, going around a stupa. The slight variations of the story, but let's go with this. Basically, he was a fly. and the cow dung was there, and he was going around the stupa, whether it was raining and he floated around on the cow dung or whether it was on a cart. This is the story. And because of that imprint of the stupa, the power of the object, and then many lifetimes, that karma, that positive imprinting increasing, in this lifetime, it ripened as coming directly in contact with the Buddha, requesting ordination, the Buddha ordaining him. How many people can say, oh, the Buddha ordaining him? Yes. Well, in effect, we could say that, but through our gurus. Yeah. So the power of the imprint, don't dismiss that. Just as you said, even you're sort of not thinking about it or don't know what they all represent, but just having that mere imprint, let alone you do understand what all the, or even some of the qualities are, read about that and so forth, and even then practice that. So you could see how much more and more you would progress on the path to enlightenment by that very fact. And then when we come along in highest yoga tantra and looking at working with very subtle energies, so it's subtle energies of the body, subtle energies of the mind, basically it's the mind, then that are those subtle energies that are, you know, also the imprints we're taking into future lives. Yeah. I can go on? Yes. So, which is this, the fundamental purity of the mind. When I talk about subtle energies and we talk about clear light mind, basically we're talking about the innate purity of our mind. I mean, we say on one hand we're born with innate ignorance that's confused about how things are, but we are also have that innate purity. We've got both. So this is our potential. This is our Buddha nature. So the comparison the Buddha used to water, so water's purity is its basic properties of what? 2 bits of hydrogen, 1 bit of oxygen, and nothing else. Right? That's pure water, and it's got nothing else in it. However, so this is like the purity of the mind is like that, but we're under the influence of these delusions, these afflicted states of mind, toxic emotions, and so forth, these states of mind that sort of hijack us. Even we're feeling, you know, quite peaceful, or everything's going along nicely and so forth, and then, you know, jealousy jumps up, anger jumps up, frustration jumps up, desire jumps up, something jumps up, something, you know, it's in our mind, and then we get hijacked. We follow it. Because why do we follow it? Because we just haven't had the opportunity as little kids to be trained to train our mind, to train our mind in a positive direction, and how to rid ourselves of all those disturbing states of mind. We just weren't trained to do that, maybe until now. And that's the reality for most people, maybe until now. So the Buddha talked about the mind as a bowl of water. The purity of that is H2O, as we know, but it gets infected, if you like, or affected by these 5 conditions. Sensual desire being primary, that we follow the senses, you know, beautiful things to look at, beautiful sounds to our ears, beautiful taste, smells, touch, you know, we're always on the radar for that. And wanting more and more and more. As Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, we have tasted everything there is to taste in samsara. No new taste to be had. So I don't know how many different varieties of tea there are now. I've lost count. And there's whole rows of just tea, let alone the rows of just chocolate. And then they put chocolate in absolutely, gosh, nearly everything, isn't it? Okay. But we have tasted it all before, so don't worry about it. So this he described as a bowl of water mixed with brightly coloured paints. All looks very attractive. It's all very gorgeous. You can paint your own palette here and visualize that. Oh, I want a bit of that and that and that. I want it all. Yeah, right. So that's essential desire. Ill will, or in French, malice, this mind, this it's a mind of aversion. It's a mind of anger, hatred. It's like a bowl of boiling water. Because when our mind does get angry, when it gets vengeful and all these things, it brings heat. It brings heat to the body, actually. If we, sit down and observe ourselves at that time, but we don't because we're already hijacked. But even when it's starting, we can realize, the heat's on. We'd say we see red, right? And so that's like boiling water. Our mind's like boiling water. We're about to blow the top. Sloth and torpor. So sloth is, let's say, it's generally presented as laziness. And then in our practice, it's particularly of wanting to train the mind in shamatha, in calm abiding, laziness is the major obstacle. Well, we could say it's a major obstacle to all our practice or anything we want to really engage in. I'm going to do this today and whatever, but laziness takes over. Laziness of what? Procrastination. Laziness of, I can't, I'm no good, I'll never get there. We don't think about that as laziness. But in the Buddhist presentation, this is a form of laziness. Oh, I can't meditate, so I won't even go along. Well, hello. You don't get started, you're not going to progress anywhere, right? So these are a major sort of, or get laziness of just getting distracted. Oh, I want to watch that movie first. I mean, it doesn't mean don't ever watch a movie again, but well, as Kunya Lama Rinpoche said, first third of our life we spend putting off. When I'm older. And when we're older, in that sort of middle third of our life, we're raising families, we're studying, we're working. I'm too busy, I'll do it later. And then the last third of the life, we say, and then we're like, I'm too exhausted, I'm too weak, I can't. So we waste a life. So they're the precautions. And the minds that oppose that is having faith. I would say the first faith we have to have is in ourselves, right? Have faith in ourselves. But as the Buddha said, don't just have blind faith in what the Buddha taught. You check up for yourself, you test it like a goldsmith tests gold, you burn it, you rub it and so forth. You make sure it's the real deal, not fool's gold. In other words, you check up what the Buddha taught. And as the Buddha said, if you find something that I taught is wrong, chuck it out, because he was only as interested in truth. If you can prove it wrong, of course, we say we haven't been able to prove it wrong, so just that I don't understand it yet. Okay, faith.
I think it worked like that for me.
Okay.
I think I had to give it a go.
Yeah.
See what happens.
You give it a go, and then gradually you see the result.
Yeah.
Gradually.
So even
well, that's the checking up.
faith.
No, it's on.
Like bit,
yeah.
Bit.
That's exactly how it is.
In terms of realizing that this is beneficial.
Yeah. So it is an unfolding. It is a gradual process of just like, I've noticed I don't react so much. I've noticed I feel better. I've noticed I've got a sense of resilience. I've noticed, whatever we notice. And that is what is the foundation of that faith. So if that came first, it would be a blind faith. But it's a faith having checked up. And what have you checked up? Your experience.
And then there's also because you're just that little bit more there, you can also sort of see what's pulling you out of that as well, like some of the mind.
Yes.
Traps,
Yeah. So
it keeps that. It keeps going. Those two.
Like a dance, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you say, because you're developing the skill of observing the mind, through meditation, you're doing that. Then you're observing what the mind does. And so when you can see it's getting into the negativity, and then the next step would be, oh, what am I going to do about that? What can I antidote that with? So like with this laziness, we antidote it with 4 things. And one of those is faith. Based on your experience, you reflect on your experience and say, well, it seems to be working for me. How is it working for me? Well, these things are happening. I can see these results in my life. And so then you want to do more. Isn't it? That's how it comes. So it all comes through our own experience. We connect it with our experience. And that's what the Buddha said to do, you know. And then the next thing that comes along in this antidote to laziness is the aspiration. Oh, I want to have more of this. I want to, you know, at that very level, you know, oh, it's possible to have a state of calm abiding. It's possible to attain shamatha. I want to do that. I've got to go and do retreat now. Or I want to do the 100,000 bodhisattva, or whatever it is, you know. And perseverance, because it takes that, you know, there's the initial glow, the honeymoon period, as we say, and then you realize it's a day by day by day practice. That's what it is, day by day. That's what it is. We're in here for the long haul. The Buddha talked eons, right? Lifetimes. So like that. And then the other thing is appliancy, a flexibility of the mind. So the more these afflictions have, it's sort of like they make our minds feel very concrete, solid. And as one of my teachers said, go and meditate on your stubbornness. And I did. It went from concrete to sludge. I thought that was progress. So I could see progress, right? With my concrete mind. It was becoming more flexible. It is naturally flexible, but, you know, put concrete on top of that and it's very difficult. Yeah. Okay, so that's sloth and torpor, like water covered by mossy plants. That's the sludge.
Mossy what?
Plants. Mossy plants. Sorry. Plants. Yeah. Plants. Planks. Well, there could be planks. I mean, it depends how much sloth and torpor we have. In which case, we wouldn't be able to breathe. Might be like that. Algae, I guess. I don't know. Restlessness and worry. That's the sort of excited mind that can't even contemplate. What do you mean? Sit and meditate. You know, even the sittings are like, can't do that. That's why we have walking meditations. But that the restless mind, even we do sit and meditate and we've been doing it for so long, and then some days it feels like a train wreck in there and that our mind's agitated, but we persist with our practice. This restless state of our mind is because it's always been going to the next thought bubble or the next sensory input through our eyes and ears and so forth. And it hasn't been trained to gather that energy inwards. So restlessness or worry, oh, I don't know about that. These things that come along is like water blown into ripples by the wind. So, you know, when we talk about this, if we think about our mind being, as Lama Yeshe said, make your mind an ocean. So an ocean is water is very fluid. We're talking about the fluid, the water image. It's very fluid and changing and so forth. Make your mind an ocean, but then we use this analogy of right out in where the ocean's completely still, and in the depths where it's completely cool, not this red hot mind, cool, undisturbed, and we want to sort of rest our mind in that space. And then when we're doing that and we notice that thoughts of agitation, restlessness coming up, it's like on the surface, these ripples And so we train ourselves to bring our mind down into the depths where it's full and so forth. That's one analogy that we use, just one, right? So we all have these 5 conditions. The last one is doubt. Doubt is like muddy water, or I sort of say it's like sitting on a fence. We don't commit ourselves because, so there's three forms of doubt. There's a positive form of doubt that says, I'm not sure, but I'll give it a go. Right, that's what you're describing at the beginning. I'm not sure, but I'll give it a go. I don't know. There's a doubt tending away from the truth, which is like, nah, I don't believe a word of it. So you then don't inquire, you don't investigate further. Or, you haven't completely dismissed it, but you're tending towards, I don't know, prove it to me. Something like that. And then there's a fence-sitting doubt. So it's like a muddy water because we don't engage either. We're trying to hedge our bets. And in the teachings where it says, don't have 2-pointed mind, don't have doubt and uncertainty, there's 2-pointed mind. So the uncertainty can be, well, maybe I have doubt tending towards a cause, but I'm not good at it. So in comes out laziness. So we sabotage ourselves. And so the keen-eyed practitioner you can't see your reflection in these 5 types of water because they're obscured. So in that way, the Buddha says our minds are obscured like that. It's affected by these hindrances, and so not able to see our own good, our own Buddha nature, unable to see the good in ourselves, the good in others, or the good of both, unable to focus on the positive. It doesn't mean that putting on rose-colored glasses and everything's fantastic when it's not, because most of the time it's not, is it? But what are we wanting to develop is our positive qualities. And we've very well developed these negative states of mind because we don't have to ask them to come along. Oh, I think I'll get angry now. Now, how do I do that? No. There's no question there, is there? But we really have to work at cultivating the positive states of mind, isn't it? And just using one example of, Kajala, who visited here in 2014. Hopefully she'll come back to Australia sometime soon. We keep requesting. And I was working with Liberation Prison Project at the time, and fortunately the Dalai Lama had told her out of everything that she does to visit prisons. So were we delighted when she took up all the offers to visit the prisons. And so we're at this prison in Victoria. Doesn't matter where it was, but it just happened to be in Victoria. And after she gave the teaching and so forth, this one guy came up to me and he had this book, and it was actually a Catholic text, Christian text. And he said, it says here I can be a bad person and a good person in the same lifetime. Is that true? So he had it, I'm a bad person, I'm in prison. And he wasn't in there for being good. He'd stuffed up, he did something wrong. We never asked them what they did wrong. Not our business. We're there to help them with their positive stuff. So anyway, so I said, yes, you can be. I mean, this was mind-blowing. I can be a bad person. And because he'd labelled himself bad person, not I stuffed up, I made a mistake, I'm doing time, as the Dalai Lama says. Once people have done the time, leave them alone, let them get on with it. So, and I said, well, actually, you can be a bad person and a good person in the 1 minute. And he was like, oh, that was a bit too much information. I don't know if I can take that on board. But the possibility, because our mind is like this water. So The bad person mind is very obscured. The possibility of both is how things are. And the possibility of accessing our own good and the good in others, good in both, is, is our practice, actually. We use our wisdom mind as well that says, yeah, but don't invite them home, just in case, or whatever. But what a Buddha does is see every being's Buddha nature. It doesn't mean that a Buddha isn't aware of the atrocities they've done or so forth, that we've all done, let's face it. Beginningless lives, we've been there, done everything. It makes me a bit more cautious of not judging people because I've been there, done that. Hope I never do again. Okay, so we talk about these analogies that of what obscures the waters, and then removing those, we talk about removing all the obscurations of the afflicted states of mind. So they can be from a very gross level to more and more subtle levels. That's like, oh, well, I don't go out and do road rage anymore. Oh, but do I get irritated at it? Just like that? Yes, is what the Buddha said in those first Four Noble Truths. This mind of dukkha, dissatisfaction, discontent, sort of quite pervasive. But we can be rid of it. And so this is what I only come across this term in Buddhist teachings, adventitious stains. Adventitious means it's not a permanent part of our mind. If it was a permanent part of our mind, that's it, can't do anything about it. But it's not. Our mind changes moment by moment by moment by moment. So when I first heard that, I think we have something like 60 thoughts a day, or sometimes I say 60,000 thoughts a day, so forth, so forth. And then the same report says, and 3,000 of those are new ones. How do they determine that? I mean, maybe it's sort of some synapses that, neural pathways open up that weren't. I don't know how they determine that. I should find out because I like this analogy. And I think, what if there's 3,000 new ones? Let's make it good ones. Why not?
Maybe that's how it works.
Maybe is how it works. I don't know. So using this water, we can filter out all the rubbish from the water. We do that. We filter our water and so forth. And then the positive qualities of the pure water can again reveal themselves. We have nice crystal clean water that is transparent. So in that way, it's similar with working on our mind. We have these purification practices, which is like purified water. But we can remove all those negative influences of our mind. And when we do that, our innate positive qualities can flourish and grow. So the analogy used there is take out the weeds of garden and let the space for the beauty, the flowers, the veggies, whatever, to grow and shine forth. Our innate qualities shine forth. So this is through our practice of, of course, the practice also involves, and this is where Tantra comes along, of deliberately focusing on those positive qualities, even we haven't got rid of the others, but we're enhancing the power of those so that everything, in our mind is there through a power of habit, through a power of habit. So if we build up the positive habits, that's going to get more and more powerful. The negative doesn't get a look in. And then over time, through our practice, it'll subside. But we also use powerful methods of these purification practices. This is why we have 100,000 of this, 100,000 of that, and 100,000 of that. It's not a magic number, but it is a substantial amount of time that means that practice really takes root. I think athletes training and so forth, they have this, 10,000 hours or whatever it is before you know, when you've got it, when you're in the zone. Right. We've run out of time. No, we haven't. Time for a question or two. Yes. Yes, they have the electrodes put on. Yes.
They have played tantric.
That I don't know. Oh, okay. So that I'm not 100% sure of whether they've done that, putting the electrodes on. However, at Vajrayana Institute, we well, still the Happiness and Its Causes conference goes on 20 years now. At our first conference, Mind and Its Potential, our first conference, Geshe Dawa, who was our first Tibetan Lama at Vajrayana Institute, who's since passed away, but he said, put the electrodes here at the heart chakra. So what they have done is do that, and found that if you're meditating, say you're meditating on compassion, there's a response here before there's a brain response, before a brain response. So this is a non-physical, well, I guess somehow they were able to measure it. Don't ask me how they measure these things. So that you could say compassion, of course, is a positive quality, which is innate to us, as Charles Darwin said, we can't help it out. So they have done that one. But I'm not sure if those practitioners have been, if they've done with tantric practice, except to say they have been doing, sorry, that's mine, they have been doing with people who are highly realized beings who have control over the death process. So they get to that very subtle mind, clear light mind. They may well be engaging in tantric practice there. And the Dalai Lama is very interested that in that period where you're clinically dead, but your mind is still present in the body, and that practitioner is able to use that very subtle level of mind. I mean, it's a very advanced technique that to measure, make measurements then. So they could be engaging in tantric practice then, because they say, that if you've got control over life or death, and there are, people like the Dalai Lama and so forth who do, we know that before you pass from this life, you determine how long you want to stay in that clear light mind. I mean, I can say, I want to stay in that for, eons, and a nanosecond later, well, I never got there anyway, let alone, and let alone a nanosecond later. So they're able to use those very subtle energies, which is the same subtle energies that we use in Tantra. So,
and are you trying to
there's a lot of study on that in relation to the neural pathways. I know in terms of, yes, in terms of addiction's been one of the things. At one of those Mind and Life Institute, it was around addiction. But it wasn't, the one that I remember was that what they realized that addicts, and given that attachment, addiction is attachment that has gone to the extreme. We're talking extreme here. Addiction, that it's a thickening of the telomeres in the brain, but it goes beyond, like initially you get a, pleasure, reward, but even it goes beyond that, and even it's no longer pleasurable, there's still, that still engages the mind. The mind's still engaged in that addictive behavior. So there's been a lot of work on neural pathways, neuroplasticity. So we would say that that would have to be a result of the mind. So that I don't know if it was Norman Deutsch, because he did a lot of work in this area, has done, or someone else, but the mind that changes the brain. So you've got the brain changes the mind, but you've got mind changes the brain. So that sort of work.
And I was also saying that one second.
Oh no. Oh, okay.
I think she identified the
You can lengthen the telomeres. Great. Yeah. Okay.
which is
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So measurable increase.
So yeah. So just to say for online, so that you can enhance the telomeres, the length of the telomeres, which relates to enhanced longevity through meditation. And there have been many studies on meditation and longevity, many studies on that with positive outcomes. Yeah. It's all supports the Buddhist teachings, exactly, impermanence, dependence. And that's why the Dalai Lama is very interested in those dialogues, those engagements, because now we have scientific methods that can, if you like, validate in a scientific framework what the Buddha said. But as the Dalai Lama said when he was interviewed by Professor Ian Hickey, so after all of this, what have you learnt from the scientists? And he said, nothing. But they've learnt a lot from me, right? Because he directs them, you know, have you thought about studying this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And then they come back and they present their results, and then he just throws another angle in. So it's wonderful that, you know, mind science is developing in this way. In fact, we've got a new course coming up, mind science, we're looking at having here. Yes.
Would you say like that?
I don't know whether meditating on compassion creates the most energy, but what they've discovered is that you meditate on compassion as little as 10 minutes a day for 2 weeks, and it has a more powerful transformative effect than meditating on your breath. Sort of from a Buddhist perspective, it makes sense, because shamatha, karma, abiding, we can develop on the basis of the breath, we can develop on the basis of a Buddha image, right? And developing that on the basis of a Buddha image, of any Buddha image, at the same time, it's empowering the mind more, just like the compassion empowers the mind, because you're harnessing those positive images. So the breath's a pretty neutral object of meditation, which makes it very universal. People don't have to, you know, people aren't going to meditate on a Buddha image if they're not Buddhist. They could meditate on if they're Christian, they could meditate, I don't know, Christian image. If they're whatever, if they've got some spiritual belief, they could have that instead. And that will have that, you know, sort of spiritual dimension, awakening your innate, we would say Buddha nature, you can call it what you will, our innate wisdom, mind. Lots to work with. What was that? Was Socrates a Buddhist? When did Socrates live?
That's great. Because he
The mind was located in the heart. Yes, we've got to look into Socrates from that point of view, because they were all trying to. Yeah. I know they had all those. I remember that, but so long ago when I studied ancient history. I've got to revisit Socrates now. Okay. Okay. Wonderful discussion. Thank you so much. We will dedicate all our wonderful merits from today Page 8, the first 2 verses. Gewajihino Buddha Lama Sangye Rudyuni Drowa Chikya Mahalopan De Sala Gopa Shu Janshub Sencho Grimpo Shema Kye Panam Ge Kuchi Ye Panyam Pa Me Payang Gone Gondu Pelwa Shu. Page 9, the long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. May you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. A prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands. Please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings. Through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss! Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Long life prayer for Tenzin Usul Rinpoche, Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings. Foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme, we make this prayer of supplication. Lama, please, please,